Priya Stocks and I come from Bangalore, which is in South India. And I've been living in Amsterdam for about 4 years. I moved from London to join my Dutch partner. And I'm a yoga teacher, but I also teach Indian cooking classes. Yoga and diet go together very much, so it's always important to try and eat healthy food. And today I'm going to show you how to cook lentils. Now, you can buy red lentils, and in India we call this dal, and they are the easiest to cook. So all you do is you take a small cup, this is my Indian cup measurement of red lentils, and you put it in a bowl or a container, and in that you put water enough to cover the dal, which I'm doing now. So what I've done is I've covered the dal or the lentils with enough water, and you set it aside and leave it for at least about 20 minutes. Because this opens up the dal, as I'll show you, and it makes it cook easier. So in here I have a pan where I've actually soaked some lentils. It makes it a bit lighter in the way of colour, and it opens out the lentils and the colour looks like this. And this has been soaking for a time. It doesn't matter if you soak it for longer than 20 minutes. The water gets a bit cloudy, and what you can do is drain the water, but that comes out when you start to boil it, and a bit of froth comes on the outside. Now this is again 1 cup of lentils that I'd soaked earlier, and I'm going to try and now prepare it. And you see it does very easily about 8 to 10 minutes. This is the easiest kind of dal or lentil that you can cook. So we take it to the stove and we turn it on. Not on a very high flame, just a medium flame. And now the first thing is it has to come to the boil. And when it comes to the boil, you see a kind of froth on top, and that's the froth I will remove and take out. That's why the water gets clouded. And we wait till it comes to the boil, we let it cook, and then in a few minutes after that it's cooked, and I'll show you the end result of that being cooked. If you put the lid on, it may overboil and the froth comes out on the stove. So you can leave it slightly half on, and when you see that it starts to bubble, you can take out the lid and the froth comes up. In Bengal, for example, in their spice tin would be the 5 spice seeds, which I'm showing you here, as opposed to one of these, because they use this more often than just cumin seeds. So that's an example of a spice tin from South India, and if it was Bengal, maybe the Panch Phoron spice, which I've just shown you. And that is the spice tin that every Indian household should have. Right, so the dal has been boiling, and I would just like to show you the froth that we need to remove from the dal. And I'm just going to get the water clear. Now, how much water you add does not matter as in rice, because as long as the dal is covered with water, that's the important part. I also would like to show you in a minute the lentils opened out. So that's the lentils opened out. So you can see it's nearly cooking, it's nearly done. Still a bit more. And I'll put it back on the stove so that we have it completely cooked. So I've taken out quite a bit of water. That's why it's good to start with a bit extra. And depending on how watery or thick you like your lentils, you can end up with whatever consistency you like. So that's going back on the stove. You can start it again at a fairly high heat. And, well, actually the total cooking time with soaking and boiling would be about 20 minutes soaking and about 15 minutes cooking. This is something I use. It's what you use to mash potato, but for dal in India we can use this to open up the dal. So what I'm going to do is just press it in, and in so doing the dal grains open out a bit more. You don't have to do this, but it's quite useful to have. And so my dal is opening out a bit more. Notice that the dal changes from the bright red that we had in the packet to a light yellow, and that's the cooking stage. Now, never add salt before the dal is cooked, otherwise it changes the process of cooking. So that is a very important point, that you don't add salt before it is fully cooked. I'm just going to test it a bit more, a bit longer. What I could do is drain out some more water so that we don't get too liquid the dal. That's how the dal looks. You can see that there are some bits that are not totally fully cooked. So I'm just going to give it a bit longer while it cooks. So here's the cooked dal, and I'm just going to transfer it into this bowl over here. And to this dal goes spices that I'm going to fry. So bring it over here, and here's the cooked dal. You can see it's nice and yellow now. And to it, remember, no salt before it's cooked. Just a half a teaspoon of salt. All Indian food has salt. It's very important to add enough salt to taste. Give it a stir around. Now that's your ready cooked dal. Now if you like it more watery, you add more water. If you like it nice and thick, that's a good consistency. And you know when the grains are cooked because it's nice and open and you can feel the cooked grains. That's your cooked dal. Every Indian household has a dish like this, a round bottom dish, and in it we fry all the lovely spices that go into the various dishes. It's quite important to have a pan like this because it distributes heat evenly. Now for the dal, we use very little quantity of spices in the way of seeds. I'm going to turn the stove on, and to the pan I add about a tablespoon of oil. Now for Indian cooking, any sunflower oil or vegetable oil is good. Don't really use olive oil because the taste is drowned by the spices that we fry it in. So while the oil is getting hot, I'm going to show you the ingredients that go into the dal. Now you can add a combination of things, a variety of things, but what I'm going to add today is mustard seed. 2 of these are equal to 1 teaspoon. And when the seeds pop, I'm going to add green chilies which look like this. They're quite hot and I'll cut them up. So they are the whole chilies, and without the stalks they look like this. And I'm going to add these chilies when the mustard seeds pop. If you like garlic or ginger you can add, but traditionally when you cook dal you just add seeds, the chilies and onions which have been chopped up. Now this is 1 onion that has been chopped up. There are 2 ways of chopping. One is where you chop them twice, first alongside this way and then again. And for the dal I'm going to use the onions that have just been chopped once. So this is half an onion and I can use half and a bit more. So starting off with the oil, here's my mustard seeds going in. So that's equivalent to 1 teaspoon of mustard seeds. Now when they pop, that's when they're ready. In goes the chilies. The green chilies. It's always nice to have green or red or the right version of the green chilies. Fresh chilies as opposed to dried chilies. So waiting for the mustard seeds to pop, you can hear the popping when it starts. And that's when you know it's ready for the chilies to go in. You have to be careful because the oil is hot and the seeds splash out very easily. In go my chilies. You don't need to cook them for too long. And then I'm just going to add the onions that have been chopped up. And I'm going to bring it forward to the table so you can have a look at how it starts to fry. And you just give it a slight stir around. So here are my onions cooking away. The pan is very hot and it still preserves the heat while I bring it out here. So this should really mix nicely and let the onions get nice and brown. I didn't add all of the onions, so I'm going to add a bit more. Put it back on the stove And that was 1 onion chopped up. So use about 3/4 of that onion to give the dal a nice consistency with onions and chilies. Now, some people add chopped tomato as well. If you like, you can add that as well to it after the onions have browned. So I'm waiting for the onions to brown. And the spices that go into the dal are chili powder. Now, you shouldn't add too much, otherwise you get very hot dal. Remember, the chili powder is really hot. So, if you're doing a teaspoon, you would do half a teaspoon of chili powder. Sprinkle it around. You don't have to wait for the onions to brown to add them. And I'm going to add cumin powder. Now again, depending on which part of India you come from, you can add different spices depending on the taste you like. A teaspoon of cumin. These are small teaspoons, so I'm adding 2 of those. Turmeric powder for colour. So just a touch of turmeric. You don't have to add a lot. Now turmeric is not a hot spice. You don't have to worry about the hotness of that. And you're going to stir it around. And you get a lovely colour with the spices that have just gone in. So here again are these colours with the onions. And we still wait for the onions to get brown. Now I'm not going to add tomato to my dal today, but if you wanted to add tomato, you have to check that the onions are cooked, and then you would add chopped tomato, just 1. Now this is 2 chopped tomatoes, but just half of this quantity, 1 good sized tomato. Nice red tomato goes into that, and the juice mix as well. If you don't add tomato, before you serve the dal, you can add half a lemon squeezed into the dal, and that gives it the equivalent of the sourness of the tomato. So that we can add when the dal is ready to be eaten. We cut a bit and just squeeze it into the dal. I'm just waiting for these onions to get nice and cooked. And all Indian cooking needs coriander. Now this is the flat parsley, but you also can use coriander if you can get fresh coriander. Just tear it off, a nice big bunch, and use the nice green bits off it. Wash it. If you'd like to chop it up, you can, but I quite like it like this, unless I'm making a dish that requires it to be nice and chopped. And you always add the coriander towards the end, right at the end. So I'm going to bring back my pan with the spices. Going to throw in some coriander there. And again, how much coriander depends on the taste that you like. Some people don't like a lot of coriander, but I do, so I'm going to add quite a few sprigs of coriander. And coming back to the dal, here is our cooked dal. Here are the onions. I'm just checking that the onions are cooked. I just pierce them through a bit and they are done. So from here, in goes the cooked onions, chilies, the spices nicely mixed. And you have your dal. Give it a nice stir. The turmeric gives it a more yellow colour as it mixes in. And now this is ready to eat, and of course if you're not eating too much later, you can heat the dal very gently over a low stove. And that's your dal cooked with all its spices. I'm going to show you how to make chapatis, which is the Indian bread. And wheat is the staple diet of North India, as opposed to rice in the south. And wheat is grown mainly in the north. And to make chapatis, we actually use chapati meal. And this is a packet that you can buy in big quantities. Now I'm going to take a cup, the Indian equivalent of the cup of chapati meal. And you need a nice big bowl in which to mix it. Now the mixing is quite important to make good chapatis. You add 1 cup of meal, just a touch of salt, as you can see, very little salt. Now warm water is nice because it helps knead better. So I've heated some water and here is the sort of lukewarm water, and I start off with a spoon and then I'll use my hands. It's very important that you don't put the whole quantity of water, and you can see how much I start with. You just pour in a bit and swivel this around. So you have to keep putting in the water step by step, not all together, so that you don't get it too sticky, and that's important. So I'm still mixing with the spoon, and now is a good stage to try and use your hands. So try and get as much out from the spoon. And it's really about feeding the dough and playing with the dough so that it binds together. Get a sense of pressing into the dough and binding it all together. And if you need more water, you add accordingly, but very little actually, because we don't want it too sticky. So it's the kneading that's important, and of course later the rolling out. And lastly, when you've got it all nice into a nice bowl, you just swivel it around in a touch of oil, same oil that you use for cooking, to moisten it. So I'm going to add very, very little water. See how little it is, where you just pour in a drop or 2. And again, keep with the mixing. So you mix till you get everything, or nearly everything, into a nice bowl. Nearly there. You really press into it. You can press with your knuckles. Just press into it a bit. A bit like playing with Play-Doh that children have when they are in nursery school. It's quite fun actually for children to do this. And now you've got it all together. Doesn't matter about the stray bits. And what I have here is some oil. I'm just going to take a teaspoon of oil and pour it over. And just let it sink in a bit, the oil. It doesn't have to be too oily, just a touch of oil, as you can see. So, here's my dough, and it is helpful to keep the dough to rest. If you can let it rest for an hour, even longer, it's fine, but half an hour at the most. Let the dough rest, and when it's resting, it must be covered. Don't leave it uncovered. So you can either put it in a damp cloth, a tea towel, and cover it, or if you have foil, you put it in some foil. And that's your chapati dough, ready to be used when you are ready. I've got some ready prepared dough here. This has been resting for more than an hour. So it's in foil. Just going to open the foil. It does get quite soft and nice, ready to use. And this is my chapati dough that I'm going to make chapatis from. So here's the foil. I'm going to keep this aside. And here is the chapati dough that is ready to be used. It's still a bit sticky, but that doesn't matter because we can use more atta. They call this atta in India, to get it a bit less sticky. It's nice to have a surface like this because it's nice and smooth. If you don't, you can have a wooden board, a round board that you can buy. And the surface must be nice and dry. Sprinkle some of the flour. Now it varies who's making the chapatis and the size of the chapatis. Some people like big chapatis, some people like small chapatis. So from 1 cup that we mixed, I'm going to try and make, would we say, golf-size balls, okay? So you make as many as you can get. This could be a bit bigger, I think. That was a bit too small. And you make these balls ready for rolling out. Make 2 more out of that. If it's still sticky, just let it be in the flour a bit, okay? Now we've got 4 balls, so we've got 4 chapatis out of that quantity of 1 cup. Now here's a roller. It's very important to have a roller. Of course you can improvise with a wine bottle if you don't have a roller like this. And I'm going to roll out the chapatis. Now rolling is also important. But before that, we can turn on the stove to get the pan nice and hot. Now it's very important to use a pan that has a very shallow surface at the end and not a high raised side. Here's my chapati being rolled out. If it sticks to the roller, it's very important that you put some more flour on it. So rolling is also an art, and it's very important to try and dust off some of the flour as you roll. And if it scrunches up like that, not to worry, just keep going with the rolling, pressing evenly on all sides so that all the sides are nicely and evenly rolled up to dust it off on each side. And there's a chapati. Now it's not automatically round, a perfect round, but the texture is important. It's not too thin and not too thick, and that's ready to cook. Now in India we have the equivalent of 2 buckets with hot coals. The first bucket, on the first bucket goes the pan, and on the second bucket of hot coals, which is our gas flame, goes the chapati that is ready to cook. So I'm going to actually show it to you on how you would make it on the gas flame. Here's my chapati ready to go on. Now remember, this pan has started from cold, so you have to wait for it to get hot. When you think it's reasonably hot, you put on the uncooked chapati. And you don't touch it till you see the ends coming up, which means that it's ready to be turned. That's quite important. I'm dusting off the flour as much as I can. So, with one hand, your right or left, just slap on the chapati onto the pan. Don't touch it at this stage because it would break. You need the ends to turn up and roll up. Now the gas flame is on sort of medium. Now the tricky bit is when you put it directly on the gas flame, because you have to really turn it high and low and turn it over with your fingers. You can use tongs, but I prefer to use my fingers. The ends are turning up. Now this is the crucial stage. The ends are turning up. So I take a spatula and I turn it over. You can see sort of bubbles form on the cooked side, on the side that's heated. When you start to get a sort of brown spotty part on the chapati, they go light brown, get ready with the other gas flame. Now this is the important part. The flame is not too high when you start, otherwise you can burn your fingers. You must lower this as appropriate when you need to. Right, I've got this nice brown bits of the chapati. On it goes on the direct flame, and it rises up, mostly, if you're lucky, if it's a good chapati. And here again, that's a good chapati because it's rising up nicely. And you just keep turning it till the sides are evenly cooked and the center a bit. So the brown patches come, which means that it's cooking nicely on all sides. You don't want it too brown. You have to watch that it doesn't burn. And always keep ready, now that's ready to go in the basket. Always keep ready a basket or a container with a nice clean tea towel, and in goes your chapati to keep warm, and that's ready to eat. We're now going to make a raita. A raita is a yogurt-based salad in Indian cuisine, and in here, you can use any bowl, is yogurt. You don't have to fill the bowl with yogurt, just leave enough room for the vegetable to go in. Now you don't have to use such a creamy yogurt, it can be just a normal ordinary yogurt because it's mixed with the vegetable. And here I have carrots which have been grated. It's about 8 to 10 carrots that I grated. And all you have to do is scoop the carrots in. This gives a nice orange look, so it's nice and colourful as well. And in India, raitas are always part of a meal because it gives that cooling effect to the hot curries that you normally eat. So swirl this around, see it getting nice and orangey. And of course you can decorate the end bits or sort of make the bits nice towards the end. What we're going to do is add a touch of salt. If you like salt, you don't have to add a lot. You can see it's literally a pinch of salt. Okay? You could have added it to the yogurt before you added the carrots in. Now, sometimes you can also fry seeds like I did for the dal. And the seeds you could fry are mustard seeds, just a small teaspoon of mustard seeds, or even cumin seeds, which are like this. Or a dal, which is also like a lentil, but it's white dal and it's used for Indian pancakes, and this is called urad dal. And you fry first the mustard seeds, and if you're adding a bit of dal, you fry till this brown slightly, and then from your pan you just put it straight into the carrot mixture. Going to add a touch of chili powder. Now just sprinkle, remember chili powder is quite hot, so you don't want it too hot, just sprinkle the chili powder over. And a touch of turmeric. Now turmeric's not hot, but it's good for colour. So you add a bit of turmeric. And a nice sprig of coriander or parsley to go in the centre. And that's your carrot raita, and you can do this with any vegetable, cucumbers, carrots, or onions or tomatoes. From the carrot raita, we're going to move on to cooking fish. Now, in India, they use various types of fish that are available there, but the equivalent in Europe could be the Dutch fish kabeljauw, which is called, kabeljauw. I think it's called haddock in English. And if it's quite a large fish, you need to cut it into fair-sized bits. So this could be a size that you cut it into. And you put a touch of salt on the fish, so just let it have a light sprinkle of salt and just mix it around. Now, for curries, because we're going to make a fish curry, a fleshy fish is very important. So don't buy a fish that is very thin, otherwise you won't get the curry nice and thick with the fleshy effect of the fish. When you cook a fish curry, it's very important to have a nice deep pan. And while the pan is heating, I'm going to get ready to put in oil. Now again, how much oil you put in depends on how oily or not you want your food to be. Now I don't like to cook very oily food, so I would put maybe 2 teaspoons of oil as opposed to 2 tablespoons. But of course, if you find the oil drying out, you can always add more. Now a simple fish curry, you always have the base of onions chopped finely. So this is 1 medium-sized onion, really small pieces. You have 2 medium-sized tomatoes. This gives it the thickness. I've chopped up the tomatoes already. Now, these are the long green chilies, which are not hot, but they're very nice because the skins are very tasty, and the skin is also vitamin C. So it's very nice to have chilies. Now, you can have a whole chili put in the curry, but what I've done is I've chopped it in 3 bits, the big bit. The seeds are what give it the hotness. So if you don't want it too hot, keep it whole, and just make a slight slit in the chili so that you get a bit of the pungency, but not too much. I'm going to put in the 3 cut up bits and the red one for colour as well. Now, ginger and garlic. I've used 2 pods of garlic which I've crushed in a garlic press, and I've cut up some ginger, a small piece. You can say 2 teaspoons of ginger. If you don't like ginger, then leave it out. Some people are not very fond of ginger, but garlic is quite essential for curries. That's all you have in the way of ingredients, and then of course your chili powder, your turmeric powder, and we'll do a selection of, I think, a curry powder here. I've got a nice garam masala, and mix it with other spices. Now, what makes a fish curry is what spices you put in. So it depends on who's cooking, as I always say. So Feel free to experiment with spices when you make fish curry. Here goes my 2 teaspoons of oil. Again, it's sunflower oil, as always. Don't use olive oil, it's wasted on Indian cooking. When the oil gets nice and hot, the first thing you always do is add onions. Never add ginger and garlic first because it will burn, because there's nothing in the pan to keep it cooking. So onions first, always, and then you're going to add your ginger and garlic. Waiting for the oil to get hot. You can just test it by, it's nearly ready because you can hear the onions sizzling away. So let's put all of the onions. Give it a good stir. I'll bring the pan forward so you can see the stages of the onions cooking. Now that you can just leave on a medium flame to cook. So the onions have browned nicely. I'm just going to bring it over here so that you can see the onions. Now if you like, you could have added 2 onions to give it more consistency. Garlic and ginger, but you don't really fry it for long because we don't want it to get burnt. It needs more in the way of consistency. Just going to use my fingers there. So garlic and ginger. Turn it around, and here goes in the tomatoes. 2 good-sized tomatoes, medium long. Here are the tomatoes that I put in. Give it a good swivel around. And now this needs to really go down in size and quantity on a medium stove. So back it goes on the stove. Remember, we haven't yet added any of these spices or anything as yet. And I'm going to cover that and leave it there for a few minutes, so that the tomatoes boil down. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for that to be done, I'm going to show you how to cook prawns. Now these are quite big prawns that have been cleaned, and you marinate them in any fish masala. Now you can buy that at Suriname shops or Asian groceries. If you don't get that, you can just use a combination of chili powder, turmeric, a good garam masala. Garam masala is made by different kinds of ingredients, but you can buy this as well. And a good heaped teaspoon of each goes in the prawns. You have to marinate the prawns for at least half an hour. Of course, longer is better, but that's a good time for the spices to mix in well. I'm just going to add a bit more turmeric to this. I used a masala that was ready-made that I bought in a shop, but any combination of spices is possible. Right, so basically this is just prawn fry, and you need a pan that is heating with some oil. Going to add oil. Now remember, you're frying the prawns, there's no other sauce with it, so quite a good amount of oil. I've added 2 teaspoons to start with, and maybe 3. Let the oil heat, and basically what you're doing is frying it on a good high temperature, just like stir frying in a way. And it's very important that you constantly move the prawns about so that they get fried well. I did add salt to the prawns when I marinated, so that's important as well. Here are the prawns ready to go in. Now the oil might splutter a bit, and as we only have 4 small pieces, you can put them all in. I'll bring it to the table so we can have a look. I'm just going to raise the heat so that it's nice and high. Now they are quite fleshy prawns, so you really need to fry them for at least 5 minutes or longer, and you'll see when the flesh starts to turn whitish, like you know it's ready. So here are the prawns being fried in oil, and before I finish the fourth process, I'd just like us to see how they look. It's really nice to fry it in a pan like this because of the even distribution of heat. You can see that most of the oil has already been used, but don't add more at this stage until it's really dry. They're already starting to cook. Be careful as you turn them around. And you can see how well the spice has mixed into the flesh of the prawns. Gives out a nice flavour, smell. So back it goes, and you've got to watch that. So a bit of stirring, but also on a lowish heat because now they need to be cooked. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, and that's cooking nicely. Going back to the fish curry, just to show you what has happened to the tomatoes. So here are the tomatoes. They've gone down in size, so they've been cooked. And now to this we're going to add the water, and it should be warm water so that it doesn't lower the temperature. There's about a cup and a bit of water in here. Now you don't want your fish curry too watery, so I added maybe a cup of water, and that's how it looks when you add the water. And to this I'm going to add the spices. Now this is again ready-made chili powder with various other spices that is actually made in India. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of this. Now if you can't buy ready-made fish curry powder, you can add chili powder, turmeric, cumin powder and coriander powder. And that gives it a mixture of what is in the spice powder already, but very fresh Indian chilies that have been dried and ground and added to make a nice red mixture. That's your liquid curry for the fish. Put it back again, turn it up a bit till it comes to the boil, and that's when the fish pieces are going to go. Here are the prawns. Now you can see the flesh has turned a nice white and the spices have coloured it nicely. And you don't want the prawns too overdone, so this is a good time to turn off the heat and let it be in the pan and cook in the remaining heat. But that's how they should look in the final stage. I'm just going to add a bit more of oil, of salt. Stir it around, and I'll leave it for about 2 minutes on the heat. I'm going to turn off the heat and let it be till we're ready to serve it. Here's the fish curry which has boiled. The water has boiled. Now this is a very thin fish curry. It's not thick. If you want to make it thick, you can add coconut milk, but then it makes the curry more sweet. So we're going to keep it more of a hot curry. We're not going to add coconut milk. Here's a piece of flesh that I'm putting in, the fleshy fish. Some people fry the fish lightly on either side, and if you like you can do that as well, but I don't. Always coriander sprinkled over. And what we're going to do is let the fish cook lightly, and again when the fish is nearly done we turn it off the stove. But that's how it looks, and I'm going to halfway after it's done turn it over and let the other side cook. So a very gentle heat for the fish. Turn off the prawns and let it rest till we're ready to serve. What I will do is put them in this is an Indian tiffin carrier which is used to put food in or send food from one house to the other, and I'm going to put it in a tiffin carrier. In India we use a lot of stainless steel containers, so everything is cooked and served in stainless steel. And here are these lovely prawns next to the raita. And we're just waiting for the fish curry to cook. But remember, fish cooks very quickly. So what I'll do is at this point turn. We're looking at 5 to 10 minutes really when you put it on the stove. I'm going to turn. You have to be very careful when you turn the fish, otherwise it can break. You have to be a bit delicate with the fish. It breaks slightly, but there we are. So we turn the fish over. Now if you don't like it too tomatoey, you can add less tomato when you make your curry. That's how it looks, and I'm going to put it back on the stove to do for maybe 4 or 5 minutes more on a low heat till it's ready, and you have to check the fish to see that it's done. And that's your fish curry. So here we have all the prepared dishes. The dal, the prawns that were fried in a spice mixture, the fish curry, the raita made with carrots, and the chapati. Now in India, we eat out of a plate called a thali, which looks like this. It's quite a heavy stainless steel dish or plate. And these are called katoris. And in the katoris go the dal, the fish curry, depending on how many katoris you have, the raita, the prawns. Anything extra left over goes on the sides of the plate. In the center goes the rice, if you've made rice. And over the rice is your chapati or papadam. And in India we eat with our hands. And as a dessert you can have fruit, just plain fruit or fruit and nuts or fruit. Here's mango with coconut, either fresh or desiccated coconut. And there's always water with the Indian meal. And so this is the full complement of the Indian meal.